They nailed a bright orange notice to my front door before the coffee even finished brewing, and the sound of that hammer felt like it went straight through my ribs, yeah. That happened, and for a second, I just stared at the word Lien like it was a tow hook, trying to drag a century and a half of my family off the hinges. Folks think a house is wood and taxes, but mine is an anchor my father handed me with grease still in the keyhole, a porch that's held Sunday stories and hurricane winds with the same stubbornness, and now a neighborhood board with clipboards and smiles wanted to price tag my history and call it compliance. If you've ever felt your blood run hot and cold at the same time, you know what I mean. One half of you wants to reason, the other half wants to lock the gate and say, "Try me." Name Sam. Sam Carter. Bay Ridge, North Carolina, shipyard man, retired, but still built like a job that lifts other people's futures. And my place sits under a live oak that keeps the sky honest. Our shutters lean a little, like they're listening to gossip. The driveway's old enough to have an opinion. And everything about it says, people lived here before. Your design committee learned what a hex code is. The neighborhood changed in slow motion. Bait shop turned smoothie bar. Grocery moved the beans to make room for organic dog treats. And then the Bay Ridge Bluffs. HOA introduced themselves with a logo that looked like a bank that sells scented candles. Standards to protect property values, order to keep things lovely. Join the community, all that. And I said no, thank you, because a board formed in 2001 doesn't get to tell a house from the 1870s how to be. First letter said my shutters weren't in the approved green. Second said the driveway was too wide. Third switched to the voice of a debt collector. Fines will accrue. And I laughed at the first one, frowned at the second, and felt my stomach drop at the third, because those numbers started growing like weeds in summertime. I went to their meeting in a room that smelled like old coffee and lemon cleaner folding chairs in rows. People who love clipboards sitting up front, and their president. Patricia Whitcomb, sharp voice and sharper glasses, called my property, like she was announcing a prize. I didn't want non-compliant shutters. Oversized driveway fence, 6 inches over height. 30 days fines. Stand, and I told her as calm as I could muster that my house predates her rulebook by a century, and change that green is older than her bylaws. That driveway was poured in '47. That fence hasn't scared a soul in 50 years. And she smiled without her eyes and said, "Standards are what keep property values up." And I said, neighbors looking out for neighbors do a better job than rulers. And rulers. And she hit her little gavel like the sound made it true. The envelopes kept coming, 300, 952 for us, and on a Saturday, I'm patching a picket where a storm chewed it. When I hear heels on my gravel, Patricia with her clipboard standing on my land, like the bylaws gave her a key. Quick inspection. She says fence over height by 6 inches, and I set the hammer down because sometimes you gotta put things down to keep from throwing them. Told her this fence has been here since '72. And the only thing it's kept out is stray dogs and bad moods. And she said maybe Bay Ridge isn't the right fit if I can't meet standards. And I stepped close enough to make sure my voice landed, and told her this house is the reason Bay Ridge has a name worth saying. I'm not going anywhere. When the lien notice showed, I called my niece because there are phone calls, and there are lifelines, and Ava Morales answers, like she irons her voice in the morning. "Uncle Sam, what's wrong?" And I told her everything. The letters, the gavel, the heels on gravel, the orange paper. And she went quiet, the way good attorneys move furniture in their head, Do not pay another dollar. I'm coming Friday. We're going to do this right. She arrived in a navy blazer that looked allergic to losing, hugged me, scanned the notice, and said, "Lien isn't a warning, it's a threat. If they record it, they can push foreclosure, and we are not letting that happen." Then she turned my old cypress table into a war room, said, "Give me everything. Letters, emails, napkin notes," and I pointed to a shoebox that used to hold Sunday shoes, and she smiled like a fisherman finding the right bait. We walked into the HOA office during open hours, like people who paid to stand upright. Carol at the desk looked like she'd learned to survive in small rooms. Ava handed a card and said, "We're requesting bylaws and 5 years of fine records per state law." Patricia popped out like a smoke alarm. "You think you can stroll in here and tell us how to run our community?" And Ava didn't blink. "I don't need to think I know the law. You've overstepped and..." Patricia said, "You won't like what you find," and Ava said, "I already don't like what I've seen." Back at the table, Ava circled numbers, drew arrows, stacked contradictions, and then tapped a line with her pen. Laws, cap fines, at $100 per violation. Without a community vote. There's no record of any vote. Next page. Your driveway got dinged at $1, $200, while the Johnsons widened theirs last summer, and never saw a letter, and when she built the full picture, it had an ugly shape out of 20 citations. In 3 years, 15 went to black homeowners, and I sat very still and felt bone tired. Thought maybe it was just me being stubborn, and she looked at me soft and said, "It wasn't just you. It never was." Word got out the way. Word does, joggers slowed. Pretend they weren't reading the same flyers. A local TV van rolled up with a reporter whose hair didn't move in the wind. Filmed me under the live oak, asked what I wanted, and I said it plain. This house isn't for sale. To a storm, or a board, or a clipboard, and overnight I turned into the guy in the produce aisle. People whisper about some neighbors. Nodded like they'd been waiting for someone else to go first. Others crossed the street like conversation might get them fined. The block party was supposed to be kids and sprinklers and potato salad. Turned into a town hall. In slow motion, a Grant from up the way. Said I could have avoided all this by following the rules like everyone else. And yeah, I set my plate down and told him rules aren't the problem. Rules applied unfairly are the problem. And he said, maybe I don't like being told what to do, and Miss Shirley from the Blue Cottage stepped up with her voice shaking. But Strong said she got fined for a white porch rail, while her neighbor's beige got a pass, and she paid because she was scared he's got the guts I didn't. And a few folks clapped in honest little bursts. Ava filed the lawsuit the next week. The HOA tried to get it tossed. A civil rights group asked to observe. The state attorney general sent a letter announcing a preliminary look at practices. And the board held an emergency meeting at night, where I'm told the room sounded like a boiler about to blow. Patricia warned they'd lose control if they bent. Her vice president cleared his throat and said, "If it's true, maybe we deserve to," and cracks start. As whispers before they turn into resignations. Ava coached me for depositions with shipyard talk. Steady hands. Steady heat, hurry. A weld it breaks. Let anger run the torch and it burns what you want to keep. And I told her she's always had more sense than me, and she carried a binder into court, so thick it needed its own chair photos of non-approved shutters that never saw a fine driveways, fat and happy in the sun, with no stern letters, spreadsheets that don't care how anyone feels. The courtroom smelled like old books, and floor cleaner neighbors filled the benches like Sunday church cameras, lined the back wall. Ava laid it out. Piece by piece, the other side talked order and property, values and slippery slopes, where lawns go wild. If one man keeps his green. And Ava said, this isn't about green, it's about fairness. And when the judge finally spoke, his glasses sat low enough to look over them, and he said the association selectively enforced rules that disproportionately burdened Mr. Carter. The lien is void, refunds will be issued, an independent audit is ordered. And people gasped the way a storm finally breaks. And I didn't cheer. I closed my eyes and squeezed my niece's hand. Because sometimes you have to hold something to believe it. We stepped into a garden of microphones, metal flowers pointed at your mouth, and I said what I owed the folks who'd spoken up. When it was hard, my great-grandfather built that house with money. Nobody thought a man like him could save. My father fixed its roof with church buddies and coffee. You could stand a spoon in. You don't take that from a family with a notice that looks official because the ink is dark. If there's a lesson document, everything ask for the records, and don't let anyone tell you a clipboard outranks your dignity. The neighborhood didn't turn into a postcard. After that, we've got scars. We've got a recall petition and a counter petition. Some people still talk about standards like they're a religion, and some talk about control, like it's a sickness. And I hear both on my morning walk, where the oyster shells crunch and the pelicans fly low, like they own the water. And people stop me now for advice, and I laugh because I'm the same man who can't keep a fig tree alive, no matter what the internet says. And I repeat what Ava told me. Write it down. Shine sunlight on it, and most bullies hate daylight. At dusk, if you stand by the fence and look back, the kitchen window glows the same way it did when Mom hummed to the radio, and Dad shook the marsh off his boots, and I sit there with a coffee. I shouldn't drink that late, and think about anchors. How they don't freeze you in place. They keep you from drifting too far from yourself. And I think about HOAs and control, and the stories we tell to make our rules sound like care. And here's where it gets spicy. Some folks say HOAs are the last line against chaos. Others say they're a polite mask on something meaner. I don't think there's one answer, but I know. If your standards land heavier on certain neighbors, time after time, if your net only catches the people you quietly don't want, then your standards are excuses dressed up for Sunday. You can argue with me. I expect you will. And that's fine. If this hit a nerve, tell me why. If you've got a story about a letter that felt like a threat, drop it if you think I should have repainted and narrowed a driveway older than the board that demanded it. Say it if you believe legacy deserves a seat at the table. Say that too. Comment. Where you're watching from what you've seen, what you think the line is between order and oppression. And if you want more real stories told, like someone sitting on your porch with you, hit like subscribe. Share this with the one neighbor who needs to hear it. And let's talk about the difference between keeping things lovely and keeping people in line.